Tom never meant to eavesdrop. It was a Thursday evening in late September, the kind of warm Texas night that lingered in their small suburban home outside Austin. He'd come back from the garage, hands smudged with grease, to grab a glass of water. The kitchen was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the faint sound of Ember's voice drifting from the living room. She was on the phone, her tone sharp and familiar. He didn't think much of it until he heard his name. "No, Sarah, I'm serious. Tom's just, a total loser husband who's never going to amount to anything. I mean, look at your guy. Trips to Aspen, that new Tesla. And I'm stuck here with a guy who smells like motor oil and thinks a big night is pizza and Netflix." Tom froze, the glass halfway to his lips. His chest tightened, like someone had just kicked him square in the ribs. He waited, hoping she'd laugh it off, say she was kidding. But she didn't. Instead, she sighed, a long, dramatic sound he'd grown used to over the past year. "I deserve better, you know? Like, when's it my turn?" He set the glass down silently and slipped back to the garage, the words looping in his head. Loser husband, never going to amount to anything. At 30, Tom wasn't naive. He knew their marriage had cracks. Ember, 2 years younger at 28, had been pulling away, her warmth replaced by a chill he couldn't thaw. But hearing it out loud, so casual and cutting, hit different. It wasn't just disappointment, it was contempt. The garage was his refuge, a cluttered space with tools scattered across a workbench and an old tarp covering the skeleton of a motorcycle he'd tinkered with years ago, before life got in the way. He stared at it, the half-finished frame glinting under the fluorescent light. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was all he'd ever be. A parts store manager with grease under his nails and a wife who dreamed of someone else. But then something shifted. A spark, faint but stubborn, flickered in his gut. No, he wasn't done yet. He'd show her. He'd show himself, and he wouldn't say a word until it was finished. Ember didn't notice the change in him, not at first. She was too busy scrolling Instagram, double-tapping photos of Sarah's husband posing by a private jet, or her friend Lauren's new infinity pool. "Look at this," she'd say, shoving her phone under Tom's nose at dinner. "Why can't we have that? You're always saving for what? We're not even old yet." Her voice dripped with frustration, her hazel eyes narrowing as she glanced at his faded t-shirt or the scuff marks on his boots. Tom just nodded, chewing his food in silence. He'd stopped arguing months ago. What was the point? She didn't see the late nights he spent in the garage, the sketches he hid under a stack of manuals, the quiet determination building inside him. He'd started working on the bike again, a custom job, something no one else had. A sleek black beast with chrome accents and a frame he'd welded himself. It wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a mission. By November, the distance between them had grown into a canyon. Ember barely looked up from her phone when he came home, her greetings replaced by complaints. "The sink's leaking again. Can't you fix something for once?" Or, "Sarah's husband just got a promotion. Must be nice." Tom took it all, swallowing the barbs like bitter pills. He'd answer with a grunt or a "I'll handle it," then disappear to the garage until midnight. She didn't know he'd started filming. It was an accident, really. His buddy Ryan, who owned a small auto shop downtown, had caught him tinkering one night and said, "Man, people would eat this up on YouTube. Real custom work? That's gold." Tom shrugged it off at first, but the idea stuck. He set up an old tripod, hit record, and talked through his process. Why he picked this bolt, how he shaped that curve. He uploaded the first video under the name Lone Star Builds, expecting nothing. By the third video, he had 500 views. By the 10th, 10,000. Tom didn't tell a soul about the YouTube channel, not even Ryan. It felt too fragile, like a dream that might shatter if he breathed on it too hard. The garage became his world, tools clanging, the hiss of the welder, the soft glow of his laptop screen as he edited footage late into the night. He wasn't a natural on camera, stumbling over words at first, but he got better. He kept it simple. "Here's why I'm using a twin-carb setup," or "This curve took 3 tries, don't give up if it's not perfect." People liked that. Comments started trickling in. "Dude, this is insane." and "can't wait to see it finished," and the numbers climbed. By January, the bike was taking shape. The frame was powder-coated black, the engine tuned to a low, throaty rumble that made his chest vibrate when he tested it. He'd poured every spare dollar into it. Parts ordered online, a second-hand leather seat he'd haggled for at a swap meet. Ember noticed the missing cash, of course. "What are you spending money on now?" she snapped one evening, arms crossed as she leaned against the kitchen counter. "Beer with Ryan? More junk for that stupid garage?" "It's not junk," Tom muttered, the first time he'd pushed back in months. Her eyebrows shot up, but he didn't elaborate. He turned and walked out, leaving her glaring at his back. She didn't follow. She never did. Ember's distance had turned into a wall. She'd stopped cooking dinner most nights, leaving him to fend for himself with whatever was in the fridge. Her laughter, once a bright spot in their early years, was reserved for phone calls with Sarah or Lauren now. Tom caught snippets. "Oh my God, he took her to Paris," or "I'd kill for a closet like that." She'd sigh, glance at their modest living room with its second-hand couch and chipped coffee table, and shake her head. "We're not even close," she'd mutter, loud enough for him to hear. He didn't argue anymore. He couldn't. Every jab, every comparison to Sarah's husband or Lauren's perfect life fueled the fire in his gut. The motorbike wasn't just a project now, it was his ticket out. Out of her scorn, out of the life she hated, out of the version of himself he'd let her define. Spring came early to Austin that year, the air thick with humidity by March. Tom's channel hit 50,000 subscribers, then 100,000. He'd posted 30 videos by then, each one raw but honest, showing every mistake and every fix. The comments exploded. "This guy's a legend, and I'd buy that bike in a heartbeat." And then the donations started. $5 here, 20 there, 100 from some guy in Oregon who wrote, "Keep it up, man. You're inspiring me to start my own build." Tom stared at the PayPal notifications, stunned. He hadn't expected this. Ember didn't notice. She was too busy picking fights. "You're never here," she said one night, tossing her phone onto the couch. "You're always in that garage doing God knows what. What's the point, Tom? You're not fixing anything around here." Her voice was sharp, her eyes cold. She'd been scrolling Instagram again. He could tell by the way her lips pursed, like she'd just seen another photo of Sarah's husband's new boat. "I'm working on something," he said quietly, meeting her gaze for the first time in weeks. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Oh, please. Working on what? Another way to waste time? You're 30, Tom. When are you going to grow up?" That was it. The last straw. He didn't yell. He wasn't the type. But something snapped inside him. He stood up, grabbed his jacket and said, "I'm done." "Done with what?" she called after him, but he was already out the door. The next day, he filed for divorce. Ryan didn't ask questions when Tom showed up at his auto shop with a duffel bag and a sleeping bag. "Crash here as long as you need," he said, nodding toward a corner of the workshop where an old cot sat under a flickering light. "What's the plan?" "Finish the bike," Tom replied, setting up his tools. "That's all I've got right now." Ryan grinned. "Good enough for me." The shop became his home. He worked during the day at the parts store, then spent every night on the bike, polishing the chrome, tweaking the suspension, uploading new videos. The channel kept growing, 200,000 subscribers by April, then 300,000. A custom parts company reached out, offering sponsorship. "We love your work," the email read. "Let's talk." Tom blinked at the screen, rereading it to make sure he wasn't dreaming. They sent him $5,000 up front to feature their exhaust system in his next build. He quit the parts store the next day. Ember called a few times after he moved out, her tone shifting between anger and confusion. "You're really doing this? Over what?" she'd say. He didn't explain. She wouldn't get it. Not yet. The divorce papers were in process, a court date set for early June. He didn't care about the house or the furniture. He just wanted out. The bike was finished by May. It was a masterpiece, matte black with red pinstriping, a low growl that turned heads when he rode it through the shop's lot. He posted the final video titled "The Lone Star Beast Complete," and watched the views climb past 1 million in a week. Offers poured in, custom orders, interviews, even a local news station wanting to feature him. Tom wasn't a loser anymore. He was a name. Ember found out 2 days before the court date. She'd been at Sarah's house scrolling YouTube out of boredom when the algorithm suggested Lone Star builds. She clicked, and there was Tom, her Tom, leaning against a motorcycle that looked like it belonged in a magazine, talking about torque and passion with a quiet confidence she hadn't seen in years. The video had 1.2 million views. The channel had 500,000 subscribers. She scrolled the comments. "This guy's a genius. And where can I get one?" and felt her stomach drop. She called him that night, her voice shaky. "Tom, I saw the videos. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me?" "You didn't want to know," he said, his tone flat. "You made that clear." "I didn't mean it," she said quickly. "All that stuff I said? I was frustrated. We can work this out. You don't have to go through with the divorce." He paused, letting her words hang in the air. Then he said, "Ember, you called me a loser. You gave up on me long before I gave up on us. I'm not coming back." "Tom, please." "No." He hung up. The courtroom was quiet on June 3rd. Tom signed the papers, his signature steady. Ember sat across from him, her eyes red, her hands twisting in her lap. She didn't fight it. Not anymore. The judge finalized it in 10 minutes. They were done. Tom walked out into the Austin sun, the weight of the last year lifting off his shoulders. He climbed onto the beast, revved the engine, and rode back to the shop. Ryan was there, along with a couple of new friends he'd met through the channel, guys who loved bikes as much as he did. A woman named Jess, a mechanic who'd messaged him on Instagram about a collaboration, waved as he pulled up. She was sharp, funny, and didn't care that he'd come from nothing. Women like her had started showing up more often lately, drawn to his quiet grit and the buzz around his name. Ember stayed in the house, alone. She scrolled Instagram that night, past Sarah's vacation photos and Lauren's new car, but her thumb stopped on a post from a local news page. A photo of Tom grinning next to the beast, captioned, "Austin's motorcycle maverick takes the world by storm." She stared at it, her chest tight. She didn't just envy her friends' husbands now. She envied him. Tom didn't look back. He had orders to fill, a second bike to design, and a life to live. The road ahead was wide open, and he was riding it full throttle. By mid-June, Lone Star Builds had crossed 600,000 subscribers, and the custom motorcycle orders were piling up faster than he could weld. The Beast, his first creation, sat proudly in Ryan's shop, drawing crowds whenever he rolled it out for a test ride. Sponsorship checks started arriving, $10,000 from a parts supplier, then $15,000 from a helmet brand. Tom leased a bigger space next to Ryan's shop, turning it into a proper workshop with a neon sign out front that read, Lone Star Customs. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. Women noticed too. Jess, the mechanic who'd reached out online, became a regular at the shop. Her quick laugh and grease-streaked hands a welcome change from the tension he'd lived with for years. Others followed. Fans who'd seen his videos. Locals who'd heard about the motorcycle guy taking Austin by storm. Tom didn't chase the attention, but he didn't shy away either. At 30, he was finding his stride, and it felt good. Ember, meanwhile, couldn't let go. She showed up at the shop unannounced. Tom was sanding a new frame when he heard her heels clicking on the concrete floor. He looked up, wiping sweat from his brow, and saw her standing there, hair curled, makeup perfect, clutching a designer purse she'd probably bought to impress Sarah. "Tom," she started, her voice softer than he'd heard in months. "Can we talk?" He set the sandpaper down, crossing his arms. "We've talked enough." "I messed up," she said, stepping closer. "I didn't see what you were doing, all this." She gestured at the shop, the bikes, the stack of tools. "I was stupid. Let's try again. We can make it work." Tom stared at her, the memory of her phone call flashing back. "You called me a loser, Ember. You told your friends I'd never amount to anything. You didn't support me. You tore me down. I'm not going back to that." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. I was venting. Everyone complains sometimes. You're blowing it out of proportion. Venting? He shook his head. You meant it. I heard it in your voice. You're only here now because I'm doing well. Where were you when I was up all night in the garage? When I needed you to believe in me? She opened her mouth, then closed it, her face flushing. I can change, she said finally, almost a whisper. Maybe, Tom replied. But I don't want to wait around to find out. He turned back to the frame, the conversation over. Ember lingered for a moment, then stormed out, her heels echoing until the door slammed shut. She didn't give up. 2 days later, she texted him a photo of their old wedding album, smiling in a white dress, him in a rented tux. Remember this? She wrote. We were happy. Tom didn't reply. Then came the voicemails, 3 in one night. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know you'd turn into this. Let's meet up. I'll cook dinner. He deleted them without a word. Her final attempt was the most absurd. She showed up at the shop again, this time with a homemade pie, apple, his favorite from their early days. Ryan spotted her first and smirked. Heads up, man. Your ex brought dessert. Tom walked out, wiping his hands on a rag. Ember held the pie out like a peace offering, a nervous smile on her lips. I made this for you, she said. Just take it. Please. He didn't move. Ember, stop. This isn't going to work. You didn't believe in me then, and I don't need you pretending to now. You spent years complaining to Sarah and Lauren about how I was holding you back. I'm done being your punching bag. Her smile faltered, then twisted into a scowl. Fine. Keep your stupid bikes and your stupid life. You'll regret this. She shoved the pie into a trash can by the door and left, her car peeling out of the lot. A week later, Ember sat in a trendy downtown cafe with Sarah and Lauren, nursing a latte she couldn't really afford. The divorce had left her with the house, but the bills were piling up, and her job at a boutique barely covered the basics. She'd scrolled Tom's YouTube channel that morning, another million-view video, this one of him unveiling a new build. The comments were full of praise, and the sponsorship logos plastered across the screen made her stomach twist. Sarah sipped her cappuccino, smirking. So, Ember, how's it feel to let a guy like that slip through your fingers? Tom's practically famous now. Lauren chimed in, twirling a strand of blonde hair. Yeah, I mean, we all thought he was kind of a dud, but wow, guess he had it in him after all. Ember's grip tightened on her mug. Wait a minute. You're joking, right? You both agreed with me. You sat there nodding when I said he was a loser, that he'd never do anything big. Sarah, you literally said he was dead weight last year. Sarah shrugged, unfazed. Sure, but that was then. A man's success depends on the woman behind him, you know? Maybe if you'd pushed him harder. Pushed him. Ember's voice rose, drawing stares from nearby tables. I pushed him to fix the sink, to get a better job. You're acting like I'm the reason he didn't succeed sooner. You two were right there with me, laughing about how pathetic he was. Lauren raised an eyebrow. We weren't married to him, sweetie. You were supposed to see the potential. Now he's out there and you're here. Ember slammed her mug down, coffee sloshing over the rim. You're unbelievable, both of you. You don't get to rewrite history just because he's hot stuff now. I'm done. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving Sarah and Lauren exchanging amused glances. The fallout was swift. Sarah texted her later. You overreacted. Call me when you calm down. Lauren didn't bother. Ember blocked them both, her anger simmering into a hollow ache. She sat alone in the house that night, the silence pressing in. No husband, no friends. Just her phone, glowing with Instagram posts she couldn't stop scrolling. Sarah's vacation pics, Lauren's new handbag, and now Tom's latest video, trending with a thumbnail of him grinning next to Jess and Ryan, the beast gleaming behind them. Tom didn't know about the cafe blowout, and he wouldn't have cared if he did. He was too busy, new builds on order, a podcast invite in his inbox, a cold beer in his hand as he laughed with his crew late into the night. The shop hummed with life, tools clanging, voices overlapping. Women lingered after hours sometimes, drawn to his quiet confidence and the buzz of his success. He didn't need Ember's pie or her apologies. He'd built something better, a life that was his, and his alone. Ember, meanwhile, stared at the cracked coffee table she'd once complained about, the one Tom had promised to replace. She'd lost more than a husband. She'd lost the chance to see what he could be. Now she sat at rock bottom, envying not just the husbands of her ex-friends, but the man she'd let go. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.